Born out of my own struggles with PTSD, this podcast is part of how God has given me renewed purpose and is unfolding His promise to give hope and healing after brokenness. So if just one of you receives hope from this podcast, if you can catch a glimpse of light in the darkness, of hope in the midst of despair, then God is keeping His promise. He is turning my mourning into dancing, giving my life hope, purpose, and meaning, and filling my heart with joy. Do you want to achieve your goals, but anxiety is tripping you up? Like to keep those fun weekend plans, but depression has you counseling again? Hey, I'm Lori, dog mom, lover of nature, and hygge enthusiast. Positive psychology skills help me overcome chronic severe PTSD. If you're ready to learn how to overcome your anxiety and depression and rediscover happiness and purpose in life, then get your cozy on and let's get started. If this podcast strikes a chord for you, I encourage you to sign up for our Facebook group. There's a link in the notes below, which is a super easy way to do it, or you can head over to Facebook and do a search for Overcoming Depression and Anxiety. And I look forward to seeing you there. I also encourage you to sign up for our email list. This is where you'll be able to receive additional information on topics we cover in our podcast. You'll also be the first to know about workshops that are coming out, so you can sign up before the seats run out. You can sign up for the email list when you join our Facebook group. Or once again, the quick and easy way is the link right below. Hello again, everyone. My name is Lori Owens, and I am the host for this brand new podcast, Practical Solutions for PTSD. I can't believe it's actually happening. I'm so glad you're here today. I'd like to take this opportunity, one, to extend a very warm welcome to you. I'm so happy you're here and taking the time out of your day to spend a few minutes with me. Yay! I'd also like to take this chance to let you get to know me a little bit. So tell a little bit about my story and what brought me to this point today. So first and foremost, I am an unapologetic follower of Jesus Christ. He is my best friend, and I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for His faithfulness. So while this podcast isn't necessarily a Christian podcast, it will be heavily influenced by my biblical worldview. We'll be talking a lot about mental health, PTSD, and developing skills to effectively navigate this life using positive psychology. There will also be some bonus episodes along the way that will focus largely on scriptural perspectives on various topics related to this podcast. So what brought me to the point of having a podcast on PTSD? I was in my mid-30s when I went back to school as a non-traditional student and ended up earning my degree in computer science. I was wrapping up that degree, had 3 semesters left when I got a summer job working for the Army. Now, on my first day there, I told my boss that I wanted more than just a summer internship, that I was actually looking for a full-time job. And I'll never forget, he leaned back in his chair, got this twinkle in his eye, and he said, be careful what you wish for. And that started a 16-year journey that would change my life forever. Talk about being green. Oh my word. I knew nothing about the Army other than the fact that we had one in the United States. I didn't understand the structure, the rank, the language, nothing. Had no family in the military, at least none that I was aware of or close to. No exposure whatsoever. So when I started, it took me a good 2 months just to be able to find my footing enough to hold an intelligent conversation with my coworkers. I used to walk around with a folder of acronyms so I could understand what in the world they were saying, along with a little cheat sheet chart that had all the ranks, because I didn't know a private from a general. I had no idea what the markings meant. I just was completely clueless. But after a couple months, I decided I found my footing enough. I was really wanting to do something that was challenging. From my perspective, I had not uprooted my entire life and turned it upside down to go back to school and get a degree to do stuff that a high schooler could do, which, I mean, is a typical internship work. That's what I was doing when I first started. I'm doing a lot of learning and, basic paperwork and stuff like that. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to live up to my capabilities, not necessarily work within a limited job description. I wanted to be able to do what I was capable of doing. That's why I'd gone back to school. I wanted to be able to stretch and to grow and to learn and to find out what I was capable of. And I found it. After working for the Army for about 2.5 months, I started asking my coworkers to teach me their job and to expand my knowledge and to help me to learn. And I ran across someone who was the lead, a gentleman was a lead on the RFID project that we had there in the office. Literally nobody in the entire office wanted to touch that project with a 10-foot pole. Everybody hated it except the person who was leading it. But I found it interesting, and it was definitely a challenge. There's a lot of politics involved, a lot of ins and outs. It can be kind of complex, but I really enjoyed it. So he was teaching me that job, and it was about mid-October. I'd gone back to school. I had 3 semesters left. I gone back to school, and around mid-October, God began to challenge me with a verse from 2 Chronicles 16:9. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, to show himself strong in behalf of those whose heart is perfect towards him. And I felt like God was calling me to volunteer myself for a person through whom he could show himself strong. Now, I'd done this once before, and I knew a little bit about what happens. One, you have an amazing experience because God does some mighty things. It's pretty amazing. It's encouraging. It's a lot of fun. It's a huge adventure. But it can also be stressful and draining and frightening and terrifying at times, because for God to show himself strong, he chooses a weak vessel through whom to do that. So he chooses someone, at least for me, this is how it's happened for me. He's put me in situations that were so far above and beyond, outside of my capabilities, my understanding, whatever. And then he showed up and just made amazing things to happen. That were the only way it could have happened was it was a God thing. That was it. So I felt like God was calling me to that again. And I prayed about it, wrestled with it for a couple weeks. And then I'm like, okay, Lord, I'll do it. 1 week later, the man that was teaching me the RFID resigned. And literally not a single person in the entire office wanted to take over for him. And I felt God prompt me and said, Lori, you need to step up and volunteer. Now, humanly speaking, there is no way I should have gotten that job. I was still a summer hire. I was still an intern. I was in school full time. I was only working 25 to 30 hours a week. There's no way I should have gotten that job. But God said volunteer, so I did, and I got it, amazingly. So the man that had been leading it, he left our command in January. I took over full time in January. I was still in school full time. In fact, I was in the hardest semester of my entire degree program when I took over as lead of this project. I learned something really valuable that semester, though. I learned how to compartmentalize and to leave work at work and school at school and to focus wholly on either when I was there. It's the only way I survived that semester. And I also deployed to Kuwait for 3 weeks in March, right in the middle of the semester. Took a lot of coordination with my professors ahead of time. We had a project that was going on at the time where they were wanting to do a proof of principle of a new RFID technology, and we had selected Kuwait for them to do it in, and I became the lead for our command. And so they waited till I graduated. I graduated in December. 5 weeks later, I deployed to Kuwait. Was with a whole team of us went. They were there for 2 weeks. We were all supposed to go home at the end of 2 weeks, but there was a lot of work that still needed to be done. So the command approved me staying on. I ended up staying on for additional 8 weeks. Everybody else went home. I'm left behind. So here I am, fresh out of college, having worked for the Army at this point by about 19 months, but I still had very little understanding of how the thing worked, how the Army worked, as far as structural and all that kind of stuff. Over 3,000 miles away from home. I have no social support network. I barely know a few people by name. I have no friends. They're on post. All my friends and colleagues had gone back home, and I'm here by myself. And I had just come off one of the toughest years I had had for a while. And I crashed. And it wasn't a huge crash, but I crashed physically, emotionally. I'm by myself. I'm really struggling. And this was the first time, or one of the first times, I saw God step up and show himself in a big way. Through the process of what I was doing, I had connected with a gentleman by the name of Link. He worked in one of the IT offices I was coordinating with. And we had kind of hit it off and become friends. He was supposed to have deployed back to the States. I believe it was in March, if I'm remembering correctly. And for some reason that he didn't understand, his unit didn't understand, his paperwork got extended by, I believe it was 8 weeks or 10 weeks, something like that. But he was there with me through the rest of my time until I flew back home. I think he flew back home like 1 week ahead of me. None of that had been planned. And I believe to this day that God stepped in and kept him there. He was also a Christian, kept him there as someone to help me make it through those 8 weeks on my own. He was a friend he was very kind to me, supported me, would hang out with me occasionally, and helped me survive those 8 weeks when I was completely lost, like a fish out of water. And that was just one of the many ways that God showed up for me. God provided in so many ways to that project. I remember in May sitting down with one of the money guys who I was looking for a specific type of funding, and I sat down with him in May, and he told me, he's like, Lori, it takes 18 to 24 months to get the kind of funding you're wanting. I was like, okay, is there an exception to policy? Because I need it in 6 weeks. And you know what? We got it. It was not because of my expertise. Trust me. I barely knew what I was doing. But God intervened, stepped in, and made this happen. And that was just one of many things that God did. It was just incredible. And how he worked with that, and we were able to make the deadline that we had to make in order to be able to roll the project out on time. There was another time that we were working on a deadline, and I was out with my battle buddy. We were headed out to a port where we shipped equipment out. And on the way out there, my battle buddy turns to me, Kenny, and he says, Lori, do you know how to put together the satellite that we're going to need out here in this port? I was like, nope, I have no idea. And he was somewhat horrified because we were on the way there. We had a team already there working, and we were going to meet them. I was like, look, God said move out. I moved out. We have a timeline. It has to be done today. Somehow God's going to work it out. We're going to get it up. I don't know how, but somehow. We got out there, and one of the soldiers who had volunteered to help us with it had put together the satellite multiple times. And we had it up and going, fully functional, before the deadline that night. But God had said go, so I went. And time again, he made a way when there was no way and provided things that shouldn't have been available. He performed so many miracles in the 22 months I was in Kuwait. I cannot begin to share all of them here. It would take forever. But there are also many challenges along the way. Throughout the 22 months I was in Kuwait, the project gained significant traction, achieved, quote, impossible things in a very short amount of time, and gained some very high-level visibility all the way up to the Pentagon. And as often happens with more visibility and popularity, all of a sudden, others who were not interested in the project before wanted to be part of it. And I quickly learned who my real friends were. I was targeted by several in power and tested beyond my limits. I'm looking back those 2 years, I'd never want to go through it again. I never want to repeat, but I also would never give it up. Yes, I learned what it was like to be lied to be set up, to be betrayed, to be targeted, to be thrown under the bus. But I also learned what it was like to work with a close-knit, highly functioning team, to form friendship bonds that last a lifetime, and to watch God come through time and time again and show himself strong on my behalf. November of 2012, I flew home for the last time. I was completely spent. I felt like a barrel someone had scraped completely clean. There was nothing left inside of me to give. I had poured all I had into the mission I was given. I held nothing back in reserve. Initially, I thought, hey, give myself a couple months just to crash, and then I'll spend the whole year, the next year, focusing on my health. I'll be back to normal, and by the end of that year. But a few months into that year, and my body began to fall apart, and I knew there was something more going on. It wasn't until years later that I learned over a course of time. It's kind of like peeling back an onion. You figure out one thing at a time. But I learned over the course of time that I had a case of extreme clinical burnout, chronic severe PTSD, brain and liver damage due to unknown chemical exposure, along with things like adrenal fatigue, chemical imbalance in the brain, thyroid problems, cellular inflammation, and I could go on. And thus began my search for answers and how to put myself back together. In that search, I discovered holistic health, functional medicine, and resilience skills. I still remember the first resilience training I ever took. I was still working in the IT department, but I had gained a passion for wellness and was coordinating with the wellness team. And one of the members of the wellness team at work said, "Hey, Lori, there's this resilience class. You should go to it." I went, never heard of resilience before and didn't even know what it was. Showed up for this training and I was just amazed. I kept thinking over and over, if I'd have known this before I went to Kuwait, I would not be in the state I am right now. I mean, who ever heard of setting boundaries, right? Or learning how to effectively manage your stress, or changing the way you think about things, or putting things in perspective so you're not spiraling out of control. All these and many more would have helped me handle the pressure in Kuwait so much better, and I would have come home in a much better state than I did. And that sparked a passion for not only health and wellness, but also resilience. And it continued to grow until I ended up changing careers. I went from an IT degree to health and wellness and resilience. I became a certified master resilience trainer. I moved from my IT job to the wellness team. I had been on the wellness team for 60 days, and I knew I had found my new home. That this was my purpose, and is helping and teaching others about wellness and resilience. But even with all of that, with all the learning I had done, with all the passion I followed, even changing my careers, it was still hard to admit that I was broken. I remember the first time I talked to my pastor and his wife and let them know that I was dealing with a really bad emotional darkness and depression. It was one of the hardest conversations I'd ever had. In fact, I wouldn't have had it except I got a direct command from God to go talk to them. The first time I told my church family I had extreme burnout and PTSD. There is a degree of shame I felt with that confession, and I dreaded admitting it. I had gone from someone who could handle and led multifaceted complex projects to someone who could barely hold it together long enough to get through an hour-long meeting with my boss. Someone who loved hiking and exploring to a person who could barely walk to the end of my driveway without collapsing. Someone who actively was engaged in my church and was there every time the doors opened, to someone who ghosted the place for months at a time. Someone who was full of life, joy, laughter, who sang all the time, loved to read, to someone who could barely hold eye contact, could not stand the sound of music, and didn't crack the spine of a book for months, years, and had to force even the briefest smile. I had been strong and independent. Me and God against the world, right? We could do anything. So admitting I was broken, that I couldn't handle life, that I didn't know how I was going to make it through another day, I couldn't be strong and fight back, at least not on my own. It was incredibly hard to do. But the amazing thing was, as it turned out, it was also very liberating. One, it helped people to know how to pray for me and support me. But it also took down a huge barrier inside of me and helped me to begin to heal, to set me free to seek and find help, and helped me to see that there are so many others around me who were also broken and needed healing. It was in the midst of some of my brokenness that I stumbled across Dr. Dan Pompa. I was listening to a documentary, and he was one of the experts they interviewed. I was walking across the living room when he began to tell his story. I stopped dead in my tracks, leaned against my recliner, and began to weep. For the first time, I heard someone describe exactly how I felt. Then he said that God had taken his pain and turned it into a purpose. Pain to purpose. That resonated so deeply with me that I adopted it for myself and held on to it for years. This podcast today is part of the purpose that was born out of the pain of my PTSD. It is now the unfolding of God's promise to me to give hope and healing after brokenness. God promises to make beauty for ashes. He doesn't waste our pain. And if just one person receives help from this podcast, if they can catch a glimpse, just a glimpse of light in the darkness, of hope in the midst of despair, then God has kept his promise. He is turning my pain into purpose, into his promise. He is making something beautiful from the ashes of my life and turning my mourning into dancing, giving my life hope, purpose, and meaning, and filling my heart and life with joy. And I know he can do the same thing with you. Hey, my friend, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with someone you know who may be struggling with depression and anxiety? Also, would you please leave a quick review for the show? Knowing how this podcast is helping you fills my heart with so much joy, and it motivates me for future episodes. For now, it's time for Sam and I to head outside to enjoy some sunshine and fresh air. We'll see you back here on Tuesdays and Thursdays for more great episodes.